$500,000! The voice shattered through the auction hall like breaking glass. Chandeliers blazed overhead. Hundreds of heads turned toward the silver-haired woman rising from her seat, her hand thrust into the air. The auctioneer's mouth opened. "Stop!" Eleanor Hartwell was already moving. The director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture shouldered past a security guard, her heels clicking rapid-fire across the marble floor. "Don't touch it!" Her voice cracked with urgency. "Nobody touches that watch with bare hands!" At the center of the stage stood an old black man in a jacket 2 sizes too large. His shoulders hunched forward. When Eleanor's voice cut through the room, he flinched, hard. His hands came up instinctively, not to fight, to shield. 75 years of reflex. Eleanor reached him. Her hands found his, and she held them. Gentle, deliberate. "Thank you," she breathed, and her eyes were wet. "Thank you for keeping him safe." Amos Washington stared at her. Tears streamed down his weathered face, but he didn't understand them. Didn't understand the applause now erupting around him. Didn't understand why this white woman with power in her voice was holding his hands like they mattered. His breath came short and fast. The sound of the room, the cheers, the gasps, the hammer hanging frozen in the auctioneer's hand, all of it began to fade. And beneath it, rising like water through cracks in a dam, came another sound, the scratch of a pen on paper. It wasn't the auction hall anymore. No brilliant lights, no applause. Just the hum of an old refrigerator in a dark kitchen and the sound of his own breathing. Amos looked down at the paper in front of him. Foreclosure agreement. The words swam. His hand, the same hand Eleanor would hold 3 days from now, gripped a cheap ballpoint pen. The ink flowed. His signature appeared at the bottom, shaky and small. A tear hit the paper. The ink blurred. Just beyond the document sat a framed photograph. Clara, 20 years younger, flower on her cheek, smiling. "I failed you, Clara." His voice barely made it past his throat. "I failed the legacy." The house was silent. He'd only wanted to fix the roof. That was all. The leak had started small, just a few drops into a bucket during heavy rain. Then the man came. Knock on the door, firm handshake, looked him square in the eye. Told him about a home equity line that could cover the repair. Simple, fast, low monthly payment to start. The man had shaken a hand, looked him in the eye. That used to mean something. Amos didn't know the payment would triple in 6 months. Didn't know adjustable rate meant they could change the rules whenever they wanted. He just knew that a man who shook your hand and met your eyes was supposed to keep his word. That's how his generation was raised. Now, the house was gone. The 48 hours the bank had given him wasn't mercy. It was a court-ordered postponement after Amos filed an emergency hardship appeal, a last-ditch effort that a judge somewhere had probably signed without looking up. 48 hours to produce $15,000, or a sheriff would arrive with a notice. Amos set the pen down. This house. Clara had spent 40 years of her life paying it off, worked double shifts as a nurse at Mercy Hospital, while Amos drove long-haul trucks. She'd missed birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas mornings, always picking up extra hours. They'd paid down the mortgage dollar by dollar, sacrifice by sacrifice. He remembered her last words. Hospice bed, her hand cold and light in his. "At least we have the house, Amos?" She'd smiled when she said it. Relieved. Our sanctuary. She died, believing they'd built something that would last. Now he was losing it. Amos pushed back from the table. He couldn't sit in Clara's kitchen anymore, couldn't look at her recipe card still tucked into the cabinet, or the scuff marks on the linoleum from decades of her footsteps, or the window where she used to stand watching for him to come home. Not tonight. His eyes drifted to the hallway, to the ceiling, to the attic access panel above. His father's old military footlocker was up there. Amos hadn't opened it in years, maybe longer. After his father died, Amos had packed the old man's things away and tried not to think about them. But right now, he needed to be near someone who understood what it meant to lose everything. His father had known, had carried that knowledge home from a war Amos barely understood. He stood. The chair scraped against the floor. The attic ladder creaked as he pulled it down. The attic smelled of dust and old canvas. Amos pulled the string for the bare bulb. Weak yellow light spilled across the angular shadow of a footlocker pushed against the far wall. The floorboards creaked as he approached. The stenciled letters were faded but defiant. SGT, James Washington, U.S. Army. Amos knelt, his knees protesting, a reminder of his own service years ago. He lifted the heavy lid. The scent hit him instantly, oil, metal, and the deep, quiet smell of his father. Inside lay the remnants of a life, a folded uniform, dog tags, and at the bottom, a dented metal toolbox. Amos opened it. The hinges groaned. Wedged between rusted wrenches and a hand drill sat a lump of blackness. He pulled it out. It looked like a piece of coal. A pocket watch, crusted in something uneven and dark, like tar left to harden. The metal underneath was invisible, but the weight was wrong. It was heavy, unreasonably heavy, like holding a collapsed star in his palm. He tried the crown, frozen solid. Why keep this? Why hide a broken, ugly thing like a treasure? Amos stared at it, and the memory surfaced. He was 10 years old. His father had just come home from work, and Amos had reached for this very toolbox. His father's hand snapped out, fast. "Don't touch that, boy." The look on his father's face wasn't anger. It was fear. That night, his father sat him down. "There's a watch in that box," he said quietly. "Belonged to your great-great-grandfather, Jubal Washington, my grandfather's father. You hear me?" Amos nodded. "Don't ever shine it, Amos. Don't polish it. You leave it exactly the way it is." "Why, Daddy?" "Because the world doesn't like to see us shine. Some things stay safe only when they're hidden." Amos came back to the present. The attic was cold. He pulled out his flip phone. The screen glowed a weak pale blue. He needed to know. He pressed the tiny buttons with calloused thumbs. 6, 6, 6 for O. 5, 5, 5 for L. 3, 3 for D. The letters appeared one at a time, agonizingly slow. Old watch. He hit search. The screen blinked. "Loading!" Finally, a page appeared. Text only. Tiny broken words. "Civil War replica, $29.99. Souvenir." He tried to click a link for images. The screen froze, then flashed white. "Page cannot be displayed." Amos snapped the phone shut. Useless. Just like him. A 75-year-old man trying to navigate a future that had left him behind. He didn't know if this was a treasure or just sentimental junk. He only knew it was heavy, and it was the only thing he had left. He climbed down to the kitchen. The refrigerator was a hollow cave, empty shelves, a carton of sour milk. He checked his wallet. 2 quarters. The court closed at 4. The legal aid office closed at the same time. If he wanted one last chance to save the house, to find a loophole, an extension, anything, he had to get downtown. The bus cost $2.50. He needed $5 to get there and back. If the pawn shop gave him $20 for the metal, that was enough. Not just for food, but enough to get to the court, enough to stand before a judge and beg for his home. He looked at the black lump in his hand. It felt like a betrayal. "Don't shine it," his father had said. "Keep it hidden." But the silence of the empty house screamed louder. "Our sanctuary, Amos," Clara's voice whispered. He couldn't save the past if he lost the future. "I'm sorry, Daddy," he whispered, slipping the watch into his pocket. It dragged the fabric down, heavy as sin. "But I have to fight." He grabbed his coat and walked out into the cold morning. The pawn shop was 6 blocks away. The pawn shop was wedged between a laundromat and a check-cashing place. A neon sign in the window buzzed and flickered. Fast Cash. Inside, it smelled like cigarettes and cheap air freshener. Glass cases lined the walls. Watches, rings, power tools, guitars. A television in the corner played a talk show with the volume too loud. Behind the counter sat Vinny, mid-40s, buzz cut, arms covered in faded tattoos. He was scrolling through his phone. "Help you?" Amos set the watch on the glass counter. Vinny picked it up, turned it over. His eyebrows went up slightly. "Heavy?" He pulled out a horseshoe magnet, brought it close. Nothing. No pull. He grabbed a loop, squinted at the surface, scraped at it with his thumbnail. Black crud came away. Underneath, something dull but not rust. He set the loop down. "Look, pops. I got a business to run. Heavy doesn't mean valuable. This could be pot metal, zinc alloy, anything. The chain's tarnished silver at best." Vinny leaned back. $20. Take it or leave it." $20. For something his father had told him to protect. Amos's jaw tightened. He reached out and took the watch back. "I'll leave it." Vinny shrugged, already back on his phone. Amos walked out. He stood on the sidewalk, the cold wind biting his face. $20, 6 blocks for an insult. If the watch was worthless, then he had nothing. But if Vinny was wrong, if there was something more, then Amos needed proof, something he could bring back, something that would make the man take him seriously. The library was 4 blocks east. He'd spent enough afternoons there when the heat got shut off at home. And Miss Sarah had helped him before when he needed to print court documents. She knew things, knew people. Maybe she'd know about old watches. He started walking. The library was warm, quiet. Sarah was at the front desk, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She looked up and smiled. "Morning, Amos." He pulled the watch from his pocket, set it on the desk. "I was hoping you could tell me what this is." Sarah picked it up carefully. Her smile faded. "Where'd you get this?" "My father's things. From his grandfather. Civil War, I think." She slipped on her reading glasses, leaned closer. "It's so dark. What is this?" "I don't know. Pawn shop said it's pot metal. Worth $20. Sarah opened a drawer, pulled out a magnifying glass, squinted through it. She pointed to a tiny spot near the crown where the black had flaked away. "Amos, look." He leaned in, underneath the crust. A dull gleam. Not gray. Something else. "What is that?" "I don't know." She set the magnifying glass down. "But it's not pot metal?" She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she reached for a stack of papers near her desk. Flyers, community notices, library event schedules. She shuffled through them. There was something. She pulled one out. "Here. This came in yesterday. Free Appraisal Day, City Museum of History, Dr. Marcus Thorne. Civil War Historian, Saturday, Tyndale. AMEL. 4 p.m. Today, Amos said. He's the real thing. My late husband used to correspond with him. Both of them researched black soldiers in the Civil War for years. If anyone can tell you what this actually is, it's Dr. Thorne. Amos stared at the flyer. The museum was downtown, a 40-minute bus ride, but he didn't have bus fare. I can't... Amos. Sarah's voice was firm. She leaned forward. My husband used to say that history doesn't shout. It hides. And when you find it, you don't walk away. She tapped the watch with her finger. You need to know what this is. If it's nothing, fine. But if it's something, if Dr. Thorne says it has value, you can go back to that pawn shop and get what you're owed. Or better yet, sell it to someone who'll pay you. Right. Amos looked at her. Then at the watch. She was right. If he could get an expert to confirm it was worth more than $20, if he had proof, he wouldn't have to beg. He could sell it properly, get enough to fight for the house. But downtown was far. He had no money for the bus. It's about 5 miles, Sarah said, reading his face. Maybe a little more. If you leave now, 2 hours. Maybe 2.5 if he paced himself. The museum closed at 4. Amos folded the flyer and slipped it into his pocket. Thank you, Miss Sarah. She squeezed his hand. Go. Outside, the wind had picked up. Clouds rolled in from the west, heavy and gray. Amos pulled his jacket tight and started walking. 5 miles. His knees already ached. But if it meant the difference between $20 and something real, something that could save Clara's house, he'd walk 10. By the time Amos reached the bus station downtown, his legs were shaking. 5 miles. 2.5 hours. His knees screamed. His throat was dry as paper. Blisters burned on both heels. The museum was 3 blocks north. He could see the marble columns, but the station had a bench and water fountains. He sat, just for a minute. Around him, the station buzzed. Commuters, students, everyone moving fast. Amos closed his eyes. Yo, old man! His eyes snapped open. 2 young men stood in front of him. Early 20s, oversized hoodies. One had a scar across his eyebrow. You good? Scar asked. Not friendly. Amos straightened. His hand went to his jacket pocket. I'm fine. You don't look fine. The other one stepped closer, angling to block the sightline from the ticket counter. Look like you need help. Scar's hand shot out, reaching for Amos's jacket. Instinct kicked in. Amos caught the wrist, twisted, firm. Not today, son. The young man yelped, stumbled back. His friend lunged. Amos shouldered him off. The kid hit the bench and swore. Footsteps, heavy. 2 transit officers appeared. Hey, break it up! The 2 young men bolted. One officer grabbed Amos by the arm, hard. You starting trouble? Amos's heart hammered. The officer's grip tightened. I said, leave him alone. The voice came from behind, deep, steady. An older man stepped forward. White hair, weathered face, Marine's cap. He held up his phone. I saw it. Those 2 tried to rob him. He was defending himself. The officer hesitated, looked between them. That true? Amos nodded. The officer let go. You filing a report? No. I just want to sit. The officers walked off, muttering into radios. The man in the Marine's cap sat beside Amos. You all right, brother? Amos nodded, catching his breath. The man studied him. You serve? Amos met his eyes. Army? Vietnam? 69. The man's expression softened. He extended his hand. Welcome home, brother. Amos shook it. The grip was firm, steady. They sat in silence for a moment. Then the man stood, tipped his cap. "Stay safe out here." "Thank you." The man walked away. Amos sat there, pulse still racing. The watch was still in his pocket. He stood, legs protesting, blisters burning. 3 blocks. He started walking. The City Museum of History rose from the sidewalk like something out of another century. Marble steps, tall columns, bronze doors. Amos climbed slowly, one hand on the railing. Each step hurt. At the top, a young woman in a blazer stood behind a podium with a clipboard. A velvet rope stretched across the entrance. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment?" Amos blinked. No. I saw the flyer. Free appraisal day?" She smiled politely, pointed to the side entrance. "Public appraisals are through the East Wing. This entrance is for pre-scheduled VIP consultations only." "But Sir, please. The public line is around the corner." Amos looked to his right. A line of people stretched down the block. 50, maybe 60 people, all holding boxes, wrapped packages, old paintings. His watch said 2:47 p.m. The appraisals ended at 4. He'd never make it. "Miss, I walked 5 miles to get here." "I'm sorry, sir. Everyone in that line has been waiting. You'll need to—" "It's from Sergeant Jubal Washington." The words burst out of him, louder than he meant. 54th Massachusetts Regiment, my great-great-grandfather." The woman's expression didn't change. "Sir, if you don't step aside, I'll have to call security." Amos stared at her. His chest tightened. He'd walked 5 miles. His feet were bleeding. His house was gone in 48 hours. And this woman with a clipboard was telling him to wait in line. "Please," he said quietly. "I just need 5 minutes." "Sir," footsteps behind him, fast. "Is there a problem?" Amos turned. A man in his 50s stood at the top of the stairs. Tall, lean, wire-rimmed glasses. Gray blazer, no tie. He carried a leather folder under one arm. The woman brightened. "Dr. Thorne, no problem. This gentleman was just—" I heard him. Thorne's eyes were on Amos, sharp, curious. "You said Jubal Washington, 54th Regiment." Amos nodded. Thorne went still. His eyes narrowed slightly like he was searching his memory. "That name—" He paused. "I know that name. My father told me about him. My great-great-grandfather." Thorne's expression shifted. Not quite belief. Something else. Caution. "The 54th Regiment is one of the most famous units in American history," Thorne said slowly, "which means relics tied to them surface constantly. Most are fakes, replicas sold to people who don't know better. I'm not trying to sell you anything." "Then what do you want?" Amos reached into his jacket, pulled out the watch, set it in his palm. Thorne looked down at it. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "Come with me." Thorne led Amos through the VIP entrance, past the woman with the clipboard, down a long marble hallway lined with paintings of old battles. Their footsteps echoed. They entered a small office, desk, bookshelves, a single lamp. Thorne closed the door. "Sit." Amos sat. His legs screamed with relief. Thorne took the watch, held it up to the light, turned it over. "Heavy," he muttered. "That's what the pawn shop said." Thorne glanced at him. "You took this to a pawn shop?" "I needed money." Thorne set the watch on the desk, pulled a magnifying glass from a drawer, leaned close. He was quiet for a long time. Just looking. Finally, he set the magnifying glass down and looked up at Amos. "Tell me what you know about Jubal Washington." "Not much. My father said he was a soldier, fought in the Civil War, told me never to shine the watch, never to sell it. Did your father say how Jubal died? No, sir. Thorne leaned back in his chair. His fingers tapped once on the desk. I've spent 30 years researching the 54th Massachusetts. I know the names, the battles, the letters, the burial records. He paused, and his voice grew quieter. Jubal Washington is in the archives, but not the way you'd hope. Amos's heart quickened. Thorne's jaw tightened. According to the official records, Jubal Washington deserted his unit 3 weeks after the assault on Fort Wagner. The report states he was caught by Confederate forces and executed as a coward. The words hit like a fist. Amos's breath caught. That's not true. I'm telling you what the record says. He came home. He had this watch. If he came home, Thorne interrupted, his voice sharp, then the United States Army has been wrong for 160 years. The room went silent. Amos stared at the watch on the desk, at the black-crusted surface that his father had told him never to clean. My father wasn't a liar. I'm not saying he was. Thorne's voice softened. I'm saying that if this watch is authentic, if it can prove Jubal Washington survived and made it home, then you're not just holding a family heirloom, you're holding evidence that will rewrite history. Amos looked up. You think it's real? Thorne hesitated. Then, I think it's worth finding out. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city. My father was a descendant of the 54th, Thorne said quietly. Not Jubal's line. Another soldier. A man named Benjamin Frost. He turned back to Amos. My father spent his whole life trying to prove that black soldiers in the Civil War were treated as equals. He died believing it was a losing fight. Thorne's jaw tightened. If there's even the smallest chance that this watch can clear Jubal Washington's name, if it can prove he wasn't a deserter, that he served with honor and came home, then I have to look, not just as a historian, as a son. Amos felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about honor. What do we do? Amos asked. Thorne picked up the watch, held it carefully. We find out what's under all this black. Thorne carried the watch to a metal table in the corner of his office. A work lamp, a magnifying stand, small bottles lined up like soldiers, chemicals Amos didn't recognize. Before we go any further, Thorne said, not looking up, I need you to understand what's at stake here. He pulled on a pair of nitrile gloves, snapped them tight at the wrists. If I authenticate this incorrectly, if I tell the world this is a genuine 54th Regiment artifact and I'm wrong, my career is over. Not damaged, over. He looked at Amos. Museums don't forgive that kind of mistake. Neither does academia. Amos's throat went dry. Then don't. But if I'm right, Thorne's voice dropped. If this is real, and I can prove it, then Jubal Washington gets his name back. And every historian who ever wrote him off as a deserter will have to answer for it. He set the watch under the lamp. The black surface drank the light. So yeah, we're doing this. Thorne pulled out a digital scale, the kind jewelers use, set it on the table, powered it on. First test, specific gravity, weight versus volume. He placed the watch on the scale. The numbers flickered, then settled. 94.3 grams. Thorne wrote it down. Then he pulled out a beaker of water, set it on the scale, zeroed it out. Lowered the watch into the water on a thin wire, suspended but not touching the bottom. The numbers jumped. He pulled a calculator from his drawer, punched in the number says. Stopped. His jaw tightened. What? Amos asked. Specific gravity of 19.2. Thorn looked up. Pot metal is around 7. Brass is 8.5. Silver is 10.5. What's 19? Thorn set the calculator down slowly. Gold. The word hung in the air. Amos stared. That can't be right. It's not conclusive, Thorn said quickly. Tungsten alloys can hit similar density. Lead, gold, mixtures, too. We need a chemical test. He pulled a small brown bottle from the shelf. The label read, nitric acid, corrosive. This will tell us what we're dealing with. Thorn unscrewed the cap. The sharp, acrid smell cut through the room. Nitric acid reacts with almost every metal. Copper turns green, silver fizzes, brass bubbles and smokes. What about gold? Gold does nothing. Thorn used a scalpel to scrape a tiny corner of the watch where the black crust had already flaked away, a sliver of dull metal underneath. He touched the acid to it with a glass dropper. 1 drop. They both leaned in. Nothing. No fizz, no smoke, no color change, just a bead of clear liquid sitting on dull metal. Thorn's hand started to shake. He set the dropper down, took off his glasses, rubbed his face. Jesus Christ! What does that mean? Thorn put his glasses back on. His voice was hoarse. It means it's gold. Solid gold. Amos felt his legs weaken. He gripped the edge of the table. How much is... A lot. Thorn's voice cracked. More than you'd get at any pawn shop, more than... He trailed off, staring at the watch. Why would a black soldier in 1863 have a solid gold pocket watch? Amos's mind raced. His father's voice echoed. Don't shine it. Keep it hidden. What now? Amos whispered. Thorn exhaled, steadied himself. Now we see what's underneath. He pulled out a bottle labeled acetone, poured a small amount into a glass dish, grabbed a cotton swab. If this black coating is what I think it is, lamp black mixed with oil or wax, it should dissolve. We'll know in about 30 seconds. He dipped the swab, pressed it gently against the watch's surface, rubbed in small circles. The black began to streak. Underneath, gold, dull, tarnished, but unmistakable. Thorn kept rubbing. The cotton swab turned black, filthy. He grabbed another, then another. With each pass, more gold appeared. The case, the back, the edges of the crown. It wasn't shiny. It was scratched, dented, worn thin in places from a century and a half of hiding. But it was gold. Thorn set the swab down. His hands were trembling. Battlefield blacking, he whispered. Soldiers did this during the war. They'd coat anything reflective. Belt buckles, buttons, canteens, so snipers wouldn't see the glint and shoot them. He looked at Amos, and his eyes were wet. Your great-great-grandfather didn't want to hide this because he was ashamed. He hid it to survive. And when he came home... Thorn's voice broke. He kept it hidden because the world wasn't safe for a black man to own something like this. Amos couldn't speak. All those years, his father, his grandfather, generations of men who knew what this was and never touched it, never polished it, never let it shine, because shining meant danger. Thorn picked up the watch with both hands, held it under the light. Jubal Washington didn't desert, he said quietly. He came home, and somebody gave him this. Who? Thorn turned the watch over, squinted at the back. There's an inscription. Let me clean it. He dipped a fresh swab in acetone. Worked carefully, methodically. The black dissolved, and beneath it, engraved in delicate script, words began to emerge. Thorn went still, his mouth opened. Nothing came out. What? Amos's heart hammered. What does it say? Thorne's voice was barely a whisper. "It says, 'To Sergeant Jubal Washington for courage under fire, from Colonel Robert Gould Shaw.'" Amos's legs gave out. He dropped into the chair behind him, hard. His hand shot up, covered his mouth, his whole body shook. Robert Gould Shaw, the name every black veteran knew, the white officer who refused to leave his men, who died with them at Fort Wagner, who was buried in a mass grave with his soldiers, because he said they were his brothers. That man had given this to Jubal. Amos's hand fell away from his mouth. His lips moved, but no sound came. Thorne set the watch down like it might shatter. "This isn't just gold," he said, his voice breaking. "This is history. This is proof." He looked at Amos, tears streaming down his face. Jubal didn't run. He was honored. Thorne couldn't stop staring at the inscription. His hand still trembled as he picked up the watch again, turned it over under the lamp. The front was clean now. Dull gold, scratched and worn, but unmistakably real. "There's more," he whispered. He dipped another cotton swab in acetone, worked the back of the case with slow, careful strokes. More black dissolved. Beneath the name, beneath Shaw's signature, another line appeared. Thorne's breath hitched. He leaned closer, squinting through the magnifying stand. "My God!" "What?" Amos's voice was raw. Thorne looked up. His eyes were red. "The engraving style, the lettering, the spacing, the flourish at the end." He set the swab down. "It matches Shaw's documented commendation style from that period. This is consistent with other pieces he's known to have inscribed." Amos didn't understand half the words, but he understood the tone. This was real. Thorne's voice dropped to almost nothing. "There's a second line. Smaller. Right below his name." He read it aloud, slow and deliberate. "To my brother in arms." The words landed like a blow. Amos made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. His hand went back to his mouth, but it didn't stop the tears. Brother. He'd been called a lot of things in 75 years. Boy, the other word. The one that cut deep, the one white men used when they wanted you to know your place. He'd heard it in Vietnam from men who were supposed to be on his side. Heard it in gas stations, diners, banks. Never brother, not from a white man in uniform, not from someone with power. But in 1863, a white officer had looked at Jubal and seen an equal, had called him brother and meant it. Not his soldier, not his subordinate, his brother. Thorne set the watch down gently. He pulled off his gloves, tossed them on the table. Sat down across from Amos. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Amos's voice came, quiet and broken. "They said he ran. I know. They said he was a coward. I know." Amos looked at the watch, at the gold, at the words that had been hidden for over a century. "My father told me never to shine it, never let anyone see it." His voice cracked. "I thought he was ashamed. I thought maybe the stories were true and he just didn't want me to know." Thorne shook his head. "Your father wasn't ashamed. He was protecting it. Protecting Jubal." "From what?" "From the world." Thorne leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You have to understand what it would have meant for a black man in the South, in any part of this country, to own something like this. Solid gold, a gift from a white officer, with words like brother carved into it." He gestured toward the watch. "It would have been stolen, or worse, Jubal would have been accused of stealing it himself. They would have hanged him for it. So he hid it, covered it in lamp black, made it look worthless, and passed it down with one rule: don't shine it. Amos pressed his palms against his eyes. His shoulders shook. He came home, Amos whispered. He didn't run. He came home. Yes, he did. Amos lowered his hands. His face was wet, but his voice was steady now. Why did Shaw give it to him? Thorne picked up the watch again, held it carefully like it might break. I don't know. But if I had to guess, he turned it over in his palm. Shaw didn't survive Fort Wagner. He died leading the charge, but before that battle, maybe days, maybe weeks, he must have known what Jubal was, what he'd done. What do you mean? Courage under fire. Thorne read the inscription again. That's not something you write lightly. Shaw saw something in Jubal, something worth remembering, worth honoring. He set the watch down between them. And then Jubal survived, came home with this, and the army recorded him as a deserter because they couldn't accept that a black soldier would carry something this valuable, that a white officer would call him brother. Amos's jaw tightened. So they erased him. They tried. Thorne stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city. But he kept it. Your great-great-grandfather kept it. And every generation after him protected it, even when they didn't understand why, even when it would have been easier to sell it, to forget it. He turned back to Amos. That's not erasure. That's resistance. Amos wiped his face with the back of his hand. What happens now? Thorne crossed his arms. His expression shifted. Firmer now. Focused. Now we prove it to the world. How? We authenticate it publicly. I'll write a full report. Submit it to the Smithsonian. But more than that, we need to get this in front of people who can make sure Jubal's name gets cleared. How long will that take? Thorne hesitated. Months, maybe a year. Amos's stomach dropped. I don't have months. I have 2 days. Thorne looked at him. 2 days for what? The bank. Foreclosure. If I don't come up with $15,000, I lose my house. The words hung heavy in the air. Thorne's expression changed. Not pity. Something sharper. Determination. Then we'd do this faster. How? Thorne sat back down, pulled out his phone, started scrolling. The Smithsonian has an emergency acquisitions protocol. It's for artifacts that are at immediate risk of being lost, sold, or destroyed. If I can make the case that this watch is historically significant, and I can, they'll expedite the process. How fast? Thorne looked up. His eyes were sharp. 72 hours, maybe less. He checked his watch. It's 3:15 now. If I make the calls tonight, we could have an emergency appraisal session by tomorrow evening. Auction the day after. Amos's pulse quickened. 2 days. It was tight, but it was possible. An auction. An emergency appraisal auction. Private. Invitation only. Museum directors, collectors, historians. He stood. If this is what I think it is, they'll come, and they'll pay. Amos stared at him. How much? Thorne picked up the watch one more time, held it to the light. Enough to save your house, and enough to bring Jubal home. If you were Amos, would you sell this priceless history to save your home, or keep it for the legacy? Tell us in the comments. The auction begins. The auction hall was smaller than Amos expected. Not the grand ballroom from his flash forward. Not yet. This was the museum's private appraisal chamber. 40 seats arranged in tight rows, tall windows along one wall, a podium at the front, flanked by 2 display cases under glass. 37 people had come on less than 48 hours' notice. Museum directors, private collectors, Civil War historians, a woman from the Library of Congress, 2 representatives from the National Archives, and Eleanor Hartwell, the director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, sitting in the front row, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Amos sat in the back corner, out of the way. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. The watch sat in a glass case on the podium, half cleaned, one side still black, the other side gleaming dull gold under the lights. Thorne stood beside it. He'd changed into a suit, wore a tie, looked like a different man. He cleared his throat. The room went quiet. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." His voice was steady, confident. "What you're about to see is, in my professional opinion, one of the most significant artifacts related to the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment ever discovered." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thorne gestured to the watch. For over 160 years, the official record has listed Sergeant Jubal Washington as a deserter, a man who abandoned his unit after the assault on Fort Wagner and was executed by Confederate forces. He paused. Let the words settle. "That record is wrong." Someone in the third row leaned forward. Thorne continued. "This pocket watch was passed down through Sergeant Washington's family for 5 generations. It was kept hidden, coated in lamp black to obscure its value. But 2 days ago, the last living descendant, Mr. Amos Washington, present here today, brought it to me for appraisal." Heads turned. Eyes found Amos. He shrank into his seat. Thorne pressed a button. A projector screen descended behind him. High-resolution images appeared. Close-ups of the inscription, the gold case, the engraving style. Specific gravity testing confirms the case is solid 18-karat gold. Acid testing corroborates this. The engraving style matches documented commendations from Colonel Robert Gould Shaw during the period of 1862 to 1863. The room was silent now. Thorne's voice dropped. The inscription reads, "To Sergeant Jubal Washington for courage under fire, from Colonel Robert Gould Shaw." And beneath that, "To my brother in arms." A woman in the second row gasped. Eleanor Hartwell leaned forward, her jaw tight. Thorne let the silence stretch. Then, "Jubal Washington did not desert. He survived. He came home, and he carried proof that one of the most celebrated officers in American history considered him not just a soldier, but a brother." The murmurs grew louder now, excited, disbelieving. A man in a gray suit stood. "How do we know it's authentic? Forgeries surface all the time." Thorne nodded. "I've submitted the watch for independent metallurgical analysis. Results confirm the gold alloy is consistent with American coin, gold, used in the 1860s. Chemical analysis confirms the lamp-black coating composition matches 19th century battlefield blacking mixtures. The engraving tool marks match Shaw's other known commendations, 2 of which are housed at the Massachusetts Historical Society. He clicked to the next slide, a side-by-side comparison. "I stake my career on this," Thorne said. "It's real." Eleanor Hartwell stood. All eyes turned to her. "If this is authentic," she said slowly, "then it doesn't just belong in a private collection. It belongs in a museum. It belongs to history." Thorne inclined his head. "That's why we're here." She sat back down. The auctioneer, a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses, stepped to the podium. Thorne moved aside. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now begin the emergency appraisal auction. Sealed bid process. Write your offer and submit within 10 minutes. Bids start at $10,000. 10,000. Amos's chest tightened. It was more than enough, but the room was buzzing, people whispering, pulling out phones. The auctioneer set a timer. Your 10 minutes begins now. Amos watched as people bent over notepads, scribbling numbers. A man in the front row made a call, spoke in rapid whispers. Eleanor Hartwell sat motionless, her eyes never leaving the watch. The woman from the Library of Congress was writing, paused, crossed it out, wrote again. Amos's heart hammered. This wasn't about the house anymore. It wasn't even about the money. It was about Jubal. The timer beeped. Time, the auctioneer said. Please submit your bids. One by one, people stood, walked to the front, dropped folded slips of paper into a mahogany box. 37 slips of paper. The auctioneer opened the box, pulled them out one by one, read them silently. His eyebrows climbed higher with each slip. He set the papers down, looked up. Ladies and gentlemen, he said quietly, we have a situation. The room held its breath. Multiple bids have exceeded $100,000. Amos stopped breathing. Due to the highly competitive nature of this auction, we're moving to a live bidding format. Starting bid, $100,000. The room erupted. $100,000. Do I hear 110? A paddle shot up. Third row, a man in a navy suit. 110,000. Another paddle. Front left. 120. 130. The numbers climbed fast. Too fast. Amos's vision blurred at the edges. Eleanor Hartwell hadn't moved. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, watching. 150,000, the auctioneer called. Do I hear 160? A woman near the window raised her paddle. 160? 170? The man in the navy suit again. 170? 180? Silence. The room hesitated. Then a voice from the back, thin, distorted by speakerphone. 200,000. Heads turned. A younger man stood near the wall, phone pressed to his ear. He nodded. My client bids 200,000. The auctioneer's eyes widened slightly. 200,000? Do I hear 210? Eleanor Hartwell raised her paddle. 210,000. The man on the phone spoke again, listened, nodded. 250. Gasps rippled through the room. Amos's breath came short. His chest felt tight. The numbers were beyond comprehension, beyond anything he'd imagined. Clara's voice whispered in his head. At least we have the house, Amos. They could save it 10 times over. But this wasn't Clara's house anymore. This was Jubal. This was Shaw calling a black man his brother when the country said they were property. Eleanor stood. The room went quiet. She didn't raise her paddle. She just stood there looking at the watch under glass. Her jaw was set. Her shoulders square. $300,000. The room erupted. Whispers, shocked faces. The man on the phone spoke rapidly. Paused. His face went pale. 350, he said quietly. Eleanor didn't hesitate. 400,000. The phone proxy swallowed. Spoke into the phone. Listened. His face tightened. 450. Eleanor turned, looked directly at him. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. 475,000. The man spoke into the phone again, longer this time. He looked desperate. Finally, he shook his head. My client? Respectfully withdraws. He sat down. The auctioneer's hand trembled slightly as he raised the gavel. $475,000. Going once. Eleanor's voice rang out. 500,000. The room stopped breathing. Amos's hands went numb. He couldn't feel his legs, couldn't feel anything except the roar of blood in his ears. $500,000. For a watch his father told him to hide, a watch he almost sold for $20 at a pawn shop. The auctioneer scanned the room. No one moved. No one spoke. $500,000, he said, his voice shaking. Going once. Silence. Going twice. Nothing. The gavel came down. Sold to the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. The room exploded into applause. Eleanor didn't sit. She turned, walked straight toward the podium. Her heels clicked sharp and fast across the floor. Thorne stepped forward. "Dr. Hartwell, we'll need to arrange—" "Now," she said. Her voice was firm, urgent. "I need to see it now." Thorne hesitated, then nodded. He opened the glass case carefully, reverently. Eleanor reached for the watch. "Stop!" Her own voice, sharp as breaking glass. Her hand froze mid-air. "Nobody touches that watch with bare hands." She turned to Thorne. "Gloves, archival gloves, and a sealed transport case." Thorne blinked, then moved fast. He pulled a pair of white cotton gloves from a drawer, handed them to her. Eleanor slipped them on. Her hands were shaking. She lifted the watch, held it up to the light, turned it slowly, examining every angle. Then she looked past Thorne, past the podium. Her eyes found Amos. She walked toward him. The crowd parted. Amos stood. His legs barely held him. Eleanor stopped in front of him, the watch cradled in her gloved hands. "Mr. Washington," she said quietly. Her voice cracked. "Thank you." She reached out, took his hands in hers. Gentle, deliberate. "Thank you for keeping him safe." Amos stared at her. Tears streamed down his face, hot and unstoppable. He didn't understand why this woman, this powerful woman with $500,000 and a museum behind her, was holding his hands like they mattered. But she was. "Jubal came home," Eleanor whispered. "And now he gets to stay home, where he belongs, where everyone can see what he was." Her voice broke. A hero, a brother, a man who mattered. The applause started again, louder this time, people standing. Amos couldn't hear it, couldn't hear anything except his own heartbeat and Clara's voice, faint and far away. "Our sanctuary, Amos. He'd saved it. But more than that, he'd given Jubal back his name." Eleanor squeezed his hands one more time, then stepped back. Thorne appeared with a black archival case. Eleanor placed the watch inside with infinite care. The lid closed with a soft click. She turned to the crowd, held the case against her chest. "Sergeant Jubal Washington is coming home," she said. Her voice rang clear and strong. "And the world will finally know the truth." The room roared. Amos sank into his chair. His hands shook. His vision swam. But for the first time in years, maybe in his whole life, he felt something he'd forgotten how to name. Pride. The bank manager looked uncomfortable. Amos set the cashier's check on the desk. $15,000, exactly what they'd demanded. "Mr. Washington, we didn't expect—" "The house is mine," Amos said quietly. "Clara's house. You don't get to take it." The manager slid the foreclosure paperwork across the desk, stamped in red, "Debt satisfied." Amos folded it carefully, slipped it into his jacket pocket. He walked out into the autumn sunlight. The air was crisp, clean. For the first time in months, he could breathe. But he didn't go home. 3 weeks later, Amos stood at the podium in the VFW hall. 75 people packed the room. Veterans, spouses, teenagers in JROTC uniforms. A few kids squirming in the back rows. "My name is Amos Washington," he began. His voice was steady. "And I want to tell you about my great-great-grandfather, a man named Jubal." He told them everything. Fort Wagner, Shaw, the word brother carved in gold. He told them about his father, about the rule, don't shine it. He told them about the pawn shop, the $20 insult, the long walk to the museum, and he told them about the moment the black coating came off and the world finally saw what had been hidden for 160 years. When he finished, the room was silent. Then a young man in the front row, 18, maybe 19, army jacket, stood up. "Sir," he said, his voice tight, "thank you for not letting them forget us." Amos's throat closed. He nodded. The applause came slow at first, then louder, people standing. Amos looked out at them, at the faces, black, white, brown, young and old, all of them listening, all of them seeing. He wasn't a failure anymore. He was a storyteller, a keeper of memory, and Jubal's name would never be forgotten again. Later that week, Amos met with a lawyer, signed the papers. The Jubal Washington Scholarship Fund, $50,000 for children of veterans, kids who needed help getting to college, kids who'd been told they didn't matter. The lawyer asked if he wanted his name on it. Amos shook his head. Just Jubal's. 6 months later. The Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture was crowded on a Saturday afternoon. Families moved through the halls in quiet reverence, voices hushed, cameras clicking softly. Amos stood in front of the Civil War exhibit. The display case was lit from above. Inside, mounted on black velvet, sat the pocket watch. Half of it was still black, untouched. The way Jubal had kept it. The other half gleamed dull gold, clean, visible. A small brass plaque beneath it read, Pocket Watch of Sergeant Jubal Washington, 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, presented by Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, 1863. To my brother in arms. Amos stared at it. Even now, months later, it felt unreal. Footsteps approached, small ones. A boy, 10 years old, maybe younger, pressed his face close to the glass. His father stood beside him, one hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy's eyes widened. Dad, he whispered. He looked like us? The father's voice was soft, proud. Yes, son, he did. And the white officer called him brother? He did. The boy went quiet, staring, absorbing. That means we mattered, the boy said. Even back then. The father's hand tightened on his son's shoulder. His voice broke. Yeah, buddy. We mattered. Amos stood 10 feet behind them, silent, unseen. His chest ached, but it was a good ache. The kind that comes from something breaking open after being closed too long. He didn't need to say anything, didn't need to be recognized. This moment, this boy seeing himself in history, was enough. Amos turned, walked toward the exit. Sunlight poured through the tall glass doors, warm, bright. He stepped outside. The city stretched before him, alive, moving. Behind him, inside the museum, Jubal's watch gleamed under the lights, no longer hidden, no longer silent. Home. True value never shouts, it waits. Have you ever discovered something in your family's history that changed everything? Share your story in the comments. Let's honor the legacies that were almost forgotten. Subscribe to JusticeSoul for more stories of hidden history, resilience, and the truth that refuses to stay buried. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction inspired by the real history of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment and Colonel Robert Gould Shaw. While the characters and specific events are fictional, the courage, sacrifice, and brotherhood of the 54th Regiment are historical fact.